to be posting, instead of a handwritten newsletter, there'll be video of each of the meetings. We're going to try this as an idea, Steve's idea. We'll see how it goes.
Try it.
But we'll be talking about it, so when you get a message today, you can have a chance to look at it. I am going to have to pull the prerogative of Happy Bucks, and Tony's ready to go with some finding, but we're not going to do it today because we're running a little tight. I would like to now introduce John Baudet to come over and introduce our speaker.
By the way, we had a program committee meeting earlier today, and have a lot of good stuff possibly lined up if we can rope in at least 10% of the people we came up with. So it'll be good. If you have any interest in joining the program committee, let me know. Chuck Berg is from the Rotary Club of Shakopee, where he served as their president in 2006 to 2007. He owns a computer services business and is serving his second term on the Board of Education in Shakopee, and I bet that's great fun these days. Right, Bruce? Great fun being on school board. Chuck served our district as the Assistant Governor for Area 6 and as the district's Technology Chair. He is a major donor and a Paul Harris Society member. So please join me in welcoming this year's District Governor, Chuck Berg.
Thank you all very much. It's really a pleasure to be here to St. Cloud. This is my 61st club visit, so I think I finally got this down. Now, I got up here last week and was able to tour Lake George and see the wonderful project that you did there, and I'm really looking forward to coming back up this summer on a Wednesday so I can see Summertime by George. I bring to you today the greetings from Rotary International President Kalyan Banerjee. Now, each year, the President continues 3 long-standing traditions. The first one is typically only important to the District Governor, and that's the selection of the blazer for the year. So, one good thing about being the District Governor is I know what I'm going to wear today. Now, if you look at the pins that I left for you at the table, there are a lot of bright colors. Red, green, yellow, orange. All of those colors were in play for the jacket this year, so I was thrilled to see gray selected. Tammy Laurent from my club was able to pull off green, but I don't think I could have. The second tradition, and the one perhaps that you're the most familiar with, is setting a theme for the year. Now last year, past President Ray Klingon-Smith chose for his theme, Building Communities and Bridging Continents. And when past District Governor Larry introduced that theme, I must admit I was a little bit jealous because I thought that really talked about what Rotary does. Because with the work that we do in our own local communities, making them stronger and more vibrant, we really do build our communities. And with our programs like Youth Exchange, Group Study Exchange, our scholarship programs, we really do bridge the continents. But when I was at the International Assembly, and President Kalyan introduced his theme of Reach Within to Embrace Humanity, it spoke to me on a very personal level. And I'm going to talk about that later. But I also immediately realized that's what Rotarians do. Indeed, we reach within to deliver the service that we do in our communities. The last tradition is the setting of goals. And here's where President Kalyan broke the tradition. Rather than setting goals for this year, he asked instead that the District Governor introduce his 3 areas of emphasis. His first is family. He wants Rotarians to keep a good life balance, recognizing that a good family is what builds a strong neighborhood, and a strong neighborhood is what builds great communities. His second area of emphasis is continuity. Now immediately I knew the best way to demonstrate the continuity that Rotary brings to the world was to talk about our nearly 3-decade effort to eradicate polio. You've heard some of the numbers before. We spent over $900 million. We've immunized over 2.25 billion children. We've seen this disease go from striking over 300,000 children a year to under 300 last year. It's still endemic in India, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Nigeria. In mid-July, I got a letter from the President's office formally acknowledging that the last case in India was in January, and they don't expect any more. India was a big one. The same is true in Afghanistan. And although they are suffering right now a small setback in Chad, they are expecting, they being the World Health Organization, the Center for Disease Control, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation gave us $355 million to end this effort, and in fact, Rotary International themselves, that if we see no big major setback, we may finally see the end of polio at the end of 2012.
Oh.
Wow.
Now, that's not just continuity, that's truly changing the world. And that is his last area of emphasis, change. He's asking that Rotarians look inside themselves, inside their clubs, and around their community, and identify those areas that they know in their heart need to be changed, and to have the courage and the conviction to step forward and make those changes. Now, at the district level, we have set 3 goals. 2 of these goals are going to sound somewhat familiar to you because most district governors have a goal around foundation and around membership. And perhaps you won't be surprised to find out that I'm not asking for less money or less people. Indeed, we are asking for a little bit more. Let me tell you specifically, the foundation goal is $1,095,000. I chose that because I wanted a simple goal. We've asked for $1 million for the last 4 years, and we haven't quite reached it, but we got to $950,000 just a little over a year ago. And I realized that a milestone, like $1 million, can sometimes also be a barrier. So I wanted to set a goal a little beyond that. But how do I make it simple? We have 3,000 Rotarians. If they were each able to give simply $1 a day, that would get us to $1,095,000. And I know that not all Rotarians can do that. $365 is pretty close to what this club averaged last year. Some clubs don't quite reach that level, but we do have a number of Rotarians that give at much higher levels. So I think it's an achievable goal. Our membership goal is 3%. It's kind of a wimpy goal. I wanted to set it at 10%. But Mark Hagstrom, my membership chair, who happens to be 6'5" and about 300 pounds, convinced me otherwise. But it wasn't his size that convinced me. It was history. He showed me what we have done in the past 10 years. And we haven't added 90 members, which is what 3% indicates, in over a decade.
90?
90. Sounds easy, doesn't it?
I think
Just a little over
here.
1 per club. Yeah, sounds easy. But we haven't done it. The final goal is the creation of a leadership development program. And we've already achieved, for the most part, most of this goal. 2 components to it. 1, a leadership academy, a program to help young professionals develop their leadership skills. We've already delivered the first of 10 courses at the district assembly. The second at fall training will continue at every district event. And some clubs are already using this program and going to local corporations and telling them to give them their good rising stars, and we'll make them better leaders. Really just a recognition that Rotary's always been a great leadership development organization. The second component is joining with District 5580 to our north and 5970 to our south to create what we are calling the North Star Rotary Leadership Institute. A program that has been around for a couple of decades, not an officially recognized Rotary organization, but one that now comprises over 290 of the 534 districts. We trained our faculty just a little over a week ago up in Brainerd, and you will be hearing a little bit more about this in the upcoming weeks. Now, I promised that I would circle back and talk to you about what reaching within to embrace humanity means to me. And there's a story to it. It's a story of how I came to be at this lectern today. You see, I was born into an alcoholic and brutally abusive household. By the time I reached junior high, I had my own struggles with alcohol, with drugs, with the law. I was truant, I was fighting, and my grades were incredibly poor. Should come then as no shock to you that my junior high principal and I became very close acquaintances. Now, the disciplinary methods of the early 70s dictated that I should have seen either the paddle or suspension. But my junior high principal surprised me, and instead he just talked with me. And he worked with me. And he mentored me. And I started to fly a little bit straighter. Still no model student, but my grades drastically improved. And for the first time in my life, an adult told me they were proud of me. I wish I could share the words that we had in those conversations, but truly they're lost to time. But the wisdom of the words and the lessons that I learned have lived on. They were twofold. First, simply that I mattered, a lesson I hadn't learned to that point. Second, that I could take control of my own destiny. It would be great to tell you that everything got better and everything turned out well after that, but life just doesn't work that way. I still had a tough family situation to deal with. I was pulled out of my home at the age of 14 and moved into foster care. And I shuffled through a number of households before finally ending up with a rather wonderful couple at a time when I really wasn't quite ready for wonderful. At the age of 16, I bought my first car. I don't know how many of you remember your first car. I know one person here does. Mine was a 1969 brown Pontiac Bonneville with the passenger side completely caved in. But I knew 3 or 4 coats of wax and this thing would be cherry. Now, I don't know what your car meant to you. Mine was freedom for me. I quit school, I got in that car, I got on the 212 and I headed west. I had no destination in mind. I was simply getting away. I lived in my car or in abandoned buildings for the next 9 months, stopping to do whatever menial labor I could find so that I could buy that next meal, that next tank of gas, a space heater so I could survive the winter. Until I was awakened one morning in Belfouche, South Dakota, by the tapping of a flashlight on my rear window. It was a sheriff's deputy. He motioned for me to get out. I did. I handed him my driver's license. And then, fully expecting him to take me into the station, he instead took me out for breakfast. And we talked. And once again, the words that were spoken are lost to time. But the wisdom of those words and the lesson have truly lived on. It was a very simple lesson. It's simply that you can't run away from your problems. He then brought me to the station. He asked for and I gave him my mother's phone number. He called her and he talked to her for about 20 minutes. He came out of his office. He told me that my parents had separated and she wanted me to move home. I can't, even if I wanted to, I told him. I had no money. He handed me $50 and told me he trusted that I would make the right decision. As I left him that morning, I noticed the rotary pin on his lapel. I did make the right decision. I returned home. I got my GED. I attended Normandale Community College, where I got my associate's degree, and just as I was graduating, my parents reconciled and bought a bowling alley in downtown Shakopee. This was my clue once again to leave, this time joining the U.S. Navy. Now, perhaps you've heard this story. A boy headed in the wrong direction joins the military and finds the discipline they need to turn their lives around. For me, though, it really wasn't discipline. It was just a sense of order. Truly, it was just a sense of normalcy that had always been lacking. But I did flourish in the Navy. I continued my education, getting my bachelor's degree from Embry-Riddle. I had the good fortune to be stationed aboard the USS Kitty Hawk, where the chaplain would put together service projects at every port we pulled into. My first opportunity to serve came in the Philippines, where I ran electrical wiring, bringing electricity to an orphanage for the first time. While there, I saw that rotary wheel once again. This time, it was Rotarians from California and the Philippines delivering those 2 precious drops, immunizing the children of the Philippines against polio. I really enjoyed the opportunity to serve. It showed me for the first time that there were people in the world with much greater need than I had. I didn't know that. I think perhaps I was a little self-centered at that time. I re-enlisted in the Navy with the intent of making it my career, I'd like to throw you a curveball now and again. A year and a half into that second enlistment, I was called into that same chaplain's office and handed a ticket home. My father was in the hospital, and it didn't look good, he told me. He escorted me down to the pier, where a Rotarian from the El Cajon Rotary Club, the same club that bought my ticket home at this time in need, was ready to escort me to the airport. We got to the San Diego airport and I was on a flight only about 15 minutes later. And it wasn't until I arrived home when I found out what had happened. My father, a couple evenings prior, had returned to the bowling alley, drunk. He grabbed a metal ashtray from the settee area and took a swing at my brother. My brother merely shoved him away. My father lost his balance, fell, hit his head on the back of one of the seats. An aneurysm burst, filling his brain cavity with blood. He did die 45 days later. Remembering a lesson I learned from a Rotarian in Belle Fourche, South Dakota, I knew this was a problem that I couldn't run away from. I returned to the Navy. I asked for and was granted a hardship discharge. I arrived home on the very day that my brother went to jail for 1 year for involuntary manslaughter. I helped my mother run the bowling alley and raise my 13-year-old brother, although I was ill-equipped to do either at the time, but we managed. Shakopee was a community of about 7,000 at the time. I put the bowling alley up for sale immediately, but that took 3 years. At the end of that 3 years, using these 3 life lessons I've shared with you today, I set about building my own life, and one that I now consider to be quite successful, measuring it really with just one metric. I've now been married to my wife, Shannon, for 25 years, and we've raised 2 wonderful daughters. My eldest, Holly, is in India doing her student teaching. My youngest, Kirsty, is at St. Thomas as a sophomore. And the fact that I can say the cycle of alcoholism and abuse skipped that generation allows me to declare my life a success. I went to work for the Red Cross for 12 years, continuing to feed that thirst for service that I had developed. I started my own business in the late 90s and localized the work that I was doing, now working primarily with at-risk youth and with women's abuse shelters. It was in one of these programs, a program called Wise Guys, where I was working with 15 and 16-year-old at-risk youth, that I met my Rotary sponsor, Dr. Corey Mortensen. We shared our life stories, and they were somewhat similar. And he said, "Chuck, you should be a Rotarian." Well, as you've heard, Rotary crossed my path a couple of times. But still, I said, "Rotary, what's that?" And he tried to explain it, and ended by saying, "Just come to our club meeting, and you will see what Rotary is." So it is, I went to Shakopee Rotary's final meeting in the basement of the KC Hall. No windows, dark brown carpeting, dark oak paneling, and perhaps 15 watts to light the place. We got up and we said the Pledge of Allegiance, and then they sang a table prayer. Then they introduced all the guests and visiting Rotarians, and they sang a song of welcome to them. Then they introduced everybody with a birthday, and they sang happy birthday to them. And then they grabbed these blue songbooks from the middle of the table and sang a 4th song, this one presumably from the 1800s. And then, as I've grown accustomed to, they had a program. The speaker, a funeral director, was selling prepaid funeral plots.
Wow, exciting.
So this is Rotary. Well, going back to my car that afternoon, with no intention of coming back, I caught up with Dr. Corey. And I said, "Corey, tell me, what kind of cult is this really?" He said, "No, Chuck, let me tell you. Shakopee Rotary is a 55-year-old club at this point, a little bit younger than yours." But he told me all of the things that they have been doing in the local community. A number of things that I was somewhat aware of, a few things that I had taken for granted. And they talked about the Strive program and how they work with the bottom 25% of the class. And so I agreed, and I came back and visited Shakopee Rotary at their first meeting in Dangerfield, a newly remodeled facility with a bright wall of windows, a completely different environment. I happened to be the first person there that day, save for the sergeant at arms. I took out my $10 and was ready to pay for my lunch when I realized I was giving my $10 to my junior high principal. Now, some of you here may know my junior high principal. His name is Jack Cole. He served this district as our district governor in 1991-92. Now, immediately, I got what Rotary is, and I knew what being a Rotarian meant. And immediately I knew that I had to be a Rotarian. And once again, I was lucky. At the age of 13 or 14, I would have never dreamed to say thank you to Jack. I never would have thought to tell him what he had meant to me at a tough time. Later in life, although I never lived more than 2 miles away, I never made the effort. Looking back, I'm really not sure I knew how. But seeing him there that day forced the issue. And I was gifted with the opportunity to say thank you. Fellow Rotarians, we have nearly wiped a disease from the face of the earth. This district and the clubs have raised over $630,000, matched by $1.5 million from our Rotary Foundation, further matched by gifts from NGOs and wealthy individuals who believe in our mission, so that we are delivering over $3.3 million worth of services around the world just in our open projects today. Bringing clean water to those without, bringing food to the hungry, bringing medicine to the ill, education to the illiterate. We are truly changing the world. And I have seen the budgets of many of the clubs in this district, and I can tell you on average, for every dollar that we send out internationally, at least $2 goes into our local communities, making them stronger, making them better, making them more vibrant. And that doesn't count the volunteer work that we put in. With 33,000 clubs around the world doing that type of work, you can see it becomes truly incalculable. Again, we are changing the world. But can an individual Rotarian change the world? Of course they can. Jack Cole changed the world for me. And in the work that I do with Rotary, with youth, and with the schools, I know that many of you here today have had that very same impact on somebody's life. You may not know it, but it doesn't mean you haven't had that impact nonetheless. Perhaps they haven't been gifted yet with the opportunity to thank you. Likely, they never will. Also quite likely, they really don't know how. But you are truly changing the world. I want you to continue to support our foundation. There's a world out there that really needs us. Continue doing the work that you do in your local community, making it stronger, better, and more vibrant for its citizens. But I also want you to remember to live your life every day as Rotarians, believing in service above self, living every day that four-way test we recited earlier. I want you to reach within to embrace humanity. I'll stand for questions. Do we have a little time, Jim?
Chuck, you mentioned $900 million in Rotary's contributions to eradicating polio. Does that include the $350 from Bill, or is that in addition?
The money from Bill was from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The $900 million I'm indicating is just from Rotarians.
Okay.
are raised by Rotarians.
Yeah.
Other questions?
In countries as large as India and as spread out as Afghanistan, how do they know that they're eradicating polio?
That's a really good question. I don't think I can give you a complete answer on that, but I know they measure it in a number of ways. First of all, they know how many present with polio symptoms, and there are none. But they also have learned to start to measure the water, and they've learned to start to treat the water when they go through too. And so if they are not seeing the polio virus within the water supply, they are fairly confident then that they have eradicated polio in those areas. Other questions? No, go ahead.
We're not the only type of service club in the world that is suffering from membership growth issues. I think Rotary is ahead of the game in terms of all the other service clubs in terms of maintaining its membership. How do you propose, and we've been very successful in this club, but what's the district strategy?
The district strategy is a number of different ways. First of all, you indicated a couple of things. One, we have maintained internationally at 1.2 million. However, most of the rest of the world is growing. Most of the loss comes from the United States. Within our district, we have to really look strongly at how we help to support the outstate clubs, the smaller outstate clubs more specifically. And I don't really consider St. Cloud, because you have a good urban population, you draw a number of people in. And the same is true in some of these other areas that surround, not for our district, but say a Duluth or a Rochester. They have enough of an urban core that they're able to keep their membership going pretty well. But these smaller clubs, just like we're seeing, not just in Rotary, but just in population, they're losing people. And they're more specifically they're young. So the strategy there is going to be drastically different. And I think we're going to end up having to realize that some of these clubs may end up consolidating, or they may end up being clubs of 15. And in a population of 1,500, that's pretty darn good. Some of the clubs, like say in Minneapolis has bled about 100 members over the past 2 years. Well, they were hit by the recession, probably more so than most. So for growth, we will be targeting in a PR campaign younger professionals to start to bring them in. That's where we're lacking the most. From our age 50 and above, our membership actually is still pretty strong. The growth in the metro area will come to some extent through some new clubs. Lunch clubs in the metro area have a problem when jobs start to go away. Many of the people don't live or work in that area anymore, so they have nothing to bring them back to the club. So our last two clubs that we added are both evening clubs. We are in the process of chartering, and in fact they're doing membership recruitment right now on an e-club. And we're not sure yet exactly what that ends up looking like. And we are also strategically looking at placing clubs in areas that aren't served yet. One example would be the Mendawakatan Sioux community down in Shakopee, a community that could easily support a club and could, quite honestly, do so more easily than many of our smaller outstate communities. So it's going to be a lot of different ways that we look at it, and a lot of it's going to be PR focusing on a new generation. So we have to use different methods than we've used in the past. We have time for one last question. That was it.
Okay. Thank you, Governor Chuck. As you can see, we are in good hands, and Rotarians come from all walks of life, don't we? Interesting to see, and thank you. I think a very, very well put together talk about why we do and why we are here. I'd like to see once, I saw Alan Herbst come in. Is Alan still here? Okay, just if you don't know, Alan's lost his mother and funeral was yesterday, so if you have time to send a card or send greetings, that would be in order. I also did not get around to welcoming. I saw some of our members in transition here. David Kleiss is over here, and I saw Cindy Hawker over here, and Dr. Mark over here. And who else is here? I didn't see anybody else. Oh, there you are. Murray Mack back there. I knew I'd seen you. I just couldn't see you when I was sitting up over here. Anyway, so let's give them a little welcome and greetings. Fred Sylvester back there in the corner, we welcome you and hope you enjoyed today's visit at the meeting. If you get a chance to say hello to them as you go out the door. John Baudet, what are we doing next week?
Next week, we're scheduled to have 2 classification talks, and then on November 1st, we have the president of the University of Minnesota coming to visit. So, where's John Fabinius?
Right back here.
John, you want to do a pitch on that one at all?
Well, it's a great day again for the University of Minnesota and those of us that have any sort of relationship with the U. So if you work with somebody that has a strong interest in the U of M, it would be a great day to bring them along as a guest. And it'll get me off the hook at the Board of Regents about making sure we have an adequately overflowing crowd for that event.
Well, we came to close to overflowing hit today for Governor Chuck here. Any other business for the club? I think we did it already. He wants to draw again. I know. Sorry, Bill says he got it there. No, I'm sorry. Bill, did you actually have the right number?
Why doesn't everybody believe?
Do we believe Bill? Everybody can believe Bill. I hope there's a few hands up there. Okay. Otherwise, thank you. We'll see you next week. Good night.